Hello, my name's Ken, and I'm here with Ashley, and we're going to be talking about our Sudoku board a little bit today. Um, we wanted to give an status update from where we were last week to where we are right now. So some of the biggest changes we've made have been around menus and also the way the Sudoku board is generated. If you remember last time, we had written a method that would generate a fully solved Sudoku board. We've now expanded that so that it will actually remove values from the board and actually create the puzzle. And so I wanted to walk through a little bit of how that works and what's going on there. So to start, we have this new method called drill board, and the purpose of this method is to fill zeros into the puzzle. And here's how it works. We first start by creating an array of integers, and we fill it with all the numbers between 0 and 80, which corresponds to, each number corresponds to one square on the Sudoku board. We use an array list instead of a normal array because array lists have this shuffle method, so we can randomize the number they are. This helps us guarantee that we won't generate the same puzzle twice. Then what we do is we do a while loop, which will loop through all of the positions, the possible positions we filled here. And what it will do is it will grab the number at 0 by removing it, and then it will also hold the value that square, that index, currently holds, sets the value to 0, and then tries to solve the puzzle. And what we're checking with this isValid method is whether the Sudoku board has more than one solution. If it does, if it's not valid, meaning it has 2 or more solutions, then we set the value back to what it was and allow the user to make sure the user is unable to change it, and we move on to the next position. In our isValid method, it's a recursive function, so what it does is it makes sure that the index and the board are valid. It makes sure that the index has not reached the end of the list. If we've reached the end of the board, meaning we've checked every square, then we know that we've solved the puzzle. So we increase the number of possible solutions by 1, and we make sure that there's one and only one solution. If there's ever more than one, then it's invalid configuration. So what we have here is we have an if-else-if statement. What we're checking for is if the cell at this index is set to 0, that means it's a cell that we can populate with a value. So we get a list of all the possible values, and we loop through all of the possible values that could go in the square, and we try setting the square to that value. And then we try to solve the rest of the board. If we're unable to solve the rest of the board, then we reset it to 0, and we say that the board is invalid, meaning it has no solution or it has more than one solution. And then we reset it to 0, and we try the next possible value. So that's our for statement here. If the board, we have an else if, so if the board value does not equal 0, it will go down and run this check. It will say check the next square, the next index, for if it's valid or not. If it's not, then we can return false because we know that there's more than one solution or there's no solutions. At the end of that if-else-if statement, if we've reached this point, because we return here or here, if we reach this far, then we know that the board is valid, so we can return true. And so that's kind of the process that we're using in a nutshell to generate our Sudoku board. So I'm going to turn the time over to Ashley now, and she's going to talk a little bit about our menus and what we're doing there. So go for it.
Okay, so in our main menus, we used a do while loop. And first of all, we established our options to our users so we could get their input. And then down here, we use a do while loop and a switch. So we're going to use in the switch, it's going to pass through the input from the user, see if it matches any of our cases. And if it does, it directs it to the proper method in the main menu controller class. And then it keeps doing that until we get a cue from the user. So that brings us to our while statement, and it's going to keep running our loop until we get a command that equals Q. So then that's going to break us out of our loop and exit our menu. So next we have in our high score list view, we used there's an if-else statement here. So the way we, and an array. So the way we calculate our high scores is we take the top 10 scores. So here we have if the current index equals less than 10, so that takes the top 10 scores we have, and then puts them into an array, and that's where we sort them from highest to lowest using a sort function there. So then we go down here and we have, for example, our get average. So in our get average, we're taking our high scores and dividing them by the number of high scores to get our average, and then it displays that to the user. So then we'll go back to Ken and he'll show you how our game runs.
Perfect. So yeah, I will run our game and we can see how it goes. So here you can see our main menu and you can push the buttons. We don't have our settings menu currently configured, but like we have our help menu that works and it displays the information about the game. You can push Q to back out of that menu and go back to the main menu. I can push N to start a new game, and it takes it a minute because it has to generate the Sudoku board. But here you can see there's our Sudoku board with the zeros in place. And I can set a square, so I can give it the S command, and I can enter coordinates. So I can say set the value at 1, 1, and I can enter a value. If I try and enter an invalid value, it tells me 0. You actually can set a 0 because 0 means reset the square. I don't actually know what it is. But I could also set it to a 5, and you can see that there's now a 5 there. So yeah, we're making really good progress on our game. We're working to bring together all of our different menu items and our different menus. But you can see that we have the basics of a Sudoku game going, and we have a lot of the engine components together and ready to go. We just need to tie it all together, and we're hoping that in the next chunk of the class we'll be able to write the actual GUI, the interface for it. So that's our program. Thank you guys so much for your time.